2014 Candidates Forum. I'm Jean McFarland, the program moderator. This segment features the candidates running for state representative in the 85th Assembly District. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by members of the local media, including the New Haven Register and the Record Journal, as well as students from Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. The opposing candidate will be allowed 1 minute for a rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing remarks. The toss of a coin has determined the order of questioning, starting with Mary Mashinsky. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates running for state representative in the 85th Assembly District. They are Frank Apuzzo, Republican, and Mary Mashinsky, Democrat. Mr. Turmel from the New Haven Register, would you ask your first question of Mary Mashinsky?
Good evening, Mary.
Evening, Luther.
What steps does the state of Connecticut need to take that it isn't already taking in order to improve our future economic outlook?
The couple of steps need to be taken according to our investigative committee report. The state has some assets and some liabilities. The asset is we have a good degree of graduates from the colleges and universities, but they're not tied in to the job market as they are in Massachusetts. So one of the things we are doing is starting to link up between the employers, the Labor Department, and the Department of Higher Education so that everyone is working on creating graduates for the job slots that we know are in Connecticut. And people will already know they have a job even before they leave school. So that's one thing. And then improvements in transportation are another important factor. When the high-speed rail comes in 2016, we do expect that will improve transportation. And then finally, continuing to reduce our energy costs.
Mr. Salam from Sheehan High School, would you please ask your first question of Frank Apuzzo?
Good evening, Mr. Apuzzo. What specific proposals do you have to make our state and our communities much more energy efficient? Would you support more green technology or return to nuclear power plants as a possible solution?
I support the green initiatives that we're currently doing, but I think that our regulations of a 20% renewal of energy is an unobtainable goal that our current administration has passed down. It's actually going to increase our energy costs. I think we need to go to more fuel cell technology and maybe utilize our underused spaces like our waste and dumps and put solar technology out there. I was out at a 40-acre solar farm just a few months ago, and they're using space to offset some of the cost, but still we're passing costs to our businesses of on higher energy costs. So I think that we need to look at the regulations of passing that 20% reusable legislation and maybe get some relief on that. So
We can I do rebuttal at this point? Okay. We can do additional on-site generation and also especially do energy efficiency. I'm on the Energy Commission in Wallingford, and we've been working with the schools, even Sheehan, and in 2 years they had saved 11% of their energy consumption just by doing efficiency improvements to the school. You can do that in private residences, you can do it in businesses and institutions. Gaylord has put on solar on their roof, and they're the first ones, and Choate Rosemary has also added solar, so we can use that technology. And we may have to in the future, to reduce the cost of transmission of energy from Canada, we may have to do some more in-state generation. I am open to additional units at the existing nuclear facilities.
Okay, the next question will be from Ms. Oswald from Sheehan High School to Mary.
Good evening. In New York State, there's a program where if a business moves into the state, they don't have to pay a certain type of taxes for 10 years. What is your plan to attract new businesses to Connecticut and to retain the current businesses that reside in our state?
Our committee had looked at the Connecticut business climate, and what we said was that Connecticut needs to focus on the economic clusters that do well here with higher education. So for example, biotechnology, energy efficiency, finances. We can't compete in some areas because it's cheaper to do it overseas, but in areas that involve innovation and knowledge, we can compete very well. And what our committee recommended is that we beef up the particular cluster, for example, in biotechnology, help them with labs, help them with students from UConn and Wesleyan and Quinnipiac, and in a partnership, and make sure they have what they need, and that will bring other businesses like them to the same area because there is a framework for supporting the biotechnology businesses.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that government needs to get out of the way and let small business and enterprise thrive to bring jobs in. We need to look at the government programs that we currently have and see what is working and attracts businesses and what doesn't work. Currently, I believe the State Economic Commission has some people that are going overseas to look for companies from overseas to come to Connecticut because our costs here are a little less. But I think that we need to be doing more in attracting businesses to stay in Connecticut. I know you mentioned that New York has the enterprise zone, but and that's what's attracting people and lowering the tax cost for those businesses. But they approved one here in Wallingford at the post office area, but it doesn't affect really Wallingford's base because we're not getting tax base off the U.S. Post Office that owns that property anyway. So we should let that property generate revenue. And maybe just lower the state's tax. Oh, sorry.
Okay, our next question will be from Mr. Regali from the Record Journal.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, Andrew.
Obviously, there's some state issues that I'm guessing you would like to address if elected, but what are some of the issues or set of issues at the local level that you feel you can address or would like to address if you're elected, whether that be through legislation or any other initiatives?
Well, I think Wallingford's local government should run Wallingford's local government, and where the state can help out, we should get involved on our state roads and bridges and infrastructure. We have some backlogs on our highways and byways, and I think that's where the state needs to intervene so we can move people to and from and transportation around. But I would definitely be a great advocate for Wallingford and work with our Wallingford government to help them secure funds if need be, like the grant process that they just got denied for the parking lot at Simpson Court. That's something that we could have worked as a legislator, worked a little harder to get that. We worked on to get a grant for the linear trail that they just awarded, which is a great project, but we should work as hard as getting businesses into town and growing our economic base here in town.
In rebuttal, I would say that what the town needs to do now is get ready for high-speed rail, which is coming in 2016. It's only 2 years away. We have the housing incentive zone, but we also have to start attracting a developer to build a combination of retail and housing around that zone. The parking lot could get paved if it was part of one of those plans. I had recommended to the town that they change their application to say that, and they refused. So they didn't get the grant for the second time. But having talked to the agency that decides who gets the grant, I know what they're looking for, and a complete plan for that transit zone is what they're looking for. And that'll finally get us the parking lot as well.
The next question will be from Mr. Salam to Mary.
Because state union workers are a vital part of any budget, are you willing to go to the unions to reduce the budget? And if so, explain how you would tell the union leadership that they must take less in pay and benefits in order to balance the state budget.
Well, the legislature does not negotiate with the unions. That's done by the governor. So the governor, as the chief executive, does the negotiations and made an agreement with them for a certain number of years, and that agreement would have to be honored. Now, I think everybody in the legislature is aware that in the future for new workers, there will probably be changes in the pension system. And just to make it last longer and not break the bank, we know that people are living longer, and so there are likely to be changes in retirement and pension as we go forward. But for the existing agreements, they were set up by the concession agreement with the governor, and that has to be honored and respected.
I would agree. We've made a commitment to our current hirees to have a pension or defined benefit, but I think with moving forward with new hires, we should go to like a more of a traditional 401k type plan for new hires moving through. Myself, I've worked in insurance and I've worked with unions. I've sold products to unions back and forth, so I would try to be an advocate to get the unions to the table to maybe help out. I think it's everybody's part as a Connecticut citizen because our pensions are so underfunded to do their part to help out. And if we could bring them to the table to help out, then that would be in everybody's best interest.
The next question will be from Catherine Oswald at Sheehan to Frank Capuzzo.
So if you're elected, how will you make Connecticut more affordable for younger people who are recent graduates of college to both live and work in state?
Connecticut is, we have great school systems, one of the best, some of the best in the country, and we're not utilizing, well, what happens is we're having a brain drain. Our college students go to school elsewhere, or they stay here, but they need to go to internships elsewhere, and then they stay in those states because we don't have jobs. We're not creating jobs here in Connecticut. Government does not create jobs. We only create the environment to help businesses want to come to Connecticut. So what we need to do is create an environment for businesses to want to come here to Connecticut and grow in Connecticut. And our current legislation is not helping out doing that.
In rebuttal, when our committee looked at the problem of young people in jobs, we found there was a misalignment between the degrees they were getting and the jobs that were open in Connecticut. For example, too many people were getting primary education degrees and attorney degrees, but they weren't enough people getting mechanical engineering and physical therapy and other openings that there are plenty of jobs there. So one thing is to make sure that the young graduates are getting into fields that we know exist in Connecticut. Having transit to get to work so that you don't have to use your car saves money for young professionals. When we have 25 trips per day on the rail line, it'll be possible for people to leave their car at home and commute to work, northward or southward. And then young professional housing. You can build housing around a train and make it affordable to live in your first home. As you get more well-to-do and you're more successful as a young professional, you can move out and get a house, but it's your first home.
The next question will be from Andrew Regali at the Record Journal to Mary Mashinsky.
Mary, because this came up recently, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Risk Reduction Earned Credit Program, which is the avenue for the early release of prisoners. I know there was a recent change by the legislator, I think in the last session, that required all prisoners through the program to serve at least 85% of their term. But I didn't know if you thought this went too far enough, or if you thought there should be any changes, or if you feel like the program is good where it's at.
The main thing we need to do to get a different outcome is to work with the prisoner before they're released to make sure they can re-enter society and that they are being supervised while they re-enter society. They have to have job skills, they have to have housing, and they have to have someone supervising them. Whether they serve 85% or 100%, it's not going to matter if when they get out, they are not prepared, no one will hire them, and they have no future. When that happens, the person's instinct is to go back to their old way of life, which is the criminal way of life. And you have to break that cycle so that the person is not a menace to society, but becomes a productive member of society.
I'm not in favor of the early release program for criminals that have violent criminals. We have in the news just recently, every day you see people that have been part of the early release program that are committing crimes, and I believe it's a public safety issue. There was a gentleman that owned a gas station in Meriden that was killed at blunt gunshot, and this legislation is passed without public input. And that's a problem with our current legislation, is that they pass laws without public input. We need more public input on our legislating stuff. And to get back to the trainway, or the busway, the fast track, we're not going to have, people aren't going to use that. There's no demand right now at the train station down here. I mean, it's a pipe dream. It's a great thing, but who's going to use that? We need to improve our current infrastructure now, our roads and bridges and infrastructure now, and stop robbing from our transportation fund. Our government is robbing from our transportation fund, and we need to stop that.
Luther Trammell, the next question of Frank Apuzzo.
Frank, a couple minutes ago, you said that government doesn't create jobs, but it sets up the environment that is used to create jobs. If you were elected, tell us a little bit about how you would go about creating that environment or working to create that environment under which more jobs could be created.
Well, I think that we're sending the wrong message when we said that we were open for business, and then we passed the highest tax increase in 2011, $1.9 billion. That's not sending the right message, and we're not. We need to reverse that and look at things that work and things that don't work in our current government, and see what costs us more money to implement. Also, our government is picking winners and losers with taxpayers' money, with your money and my money. We're picking businesses that we want to survive and businesses we don't want to survive, and that's never a good thing. Private enterprise knows what it should be doing. I think that would be the way for government to get out of the way and loosen some regulations for people to start businesses. We're just not sending the right message in Connecticut.
In Massachusetts, what they do is they link up the colleges with the high-tech businesses. They live side by side. The kids coming out of the school already know they have a job before they even get out of their last year of college. The businesses go in and hire students right out of the classroom. That's the kind of thing we can do here if we emphasize the cluster development, for example, the biotech cluster. And the Jackson Labs is an example. Build the lab, bring in a whole bunch of scientists from around the world, and then they attract other scientists and young graduate students and graduates.
The next question will be from Catherine Oswald to Mary Mashinsky.
Would you favor a change in the way the state lays and collects taxes, such as sales and income tax? Like, for example, would you repeal the sales tax and increase or modify the income tax? Or do you believe there's a better way to tax people?
There's a group working on that right now during the interim. I'm going to wait and see what they come up with. Some preliminary ideas are that the tax base is narrow rather than broad. If you make it broader, you can have lower rates. But you have to cover more items and more services, so it's a trade-off. But I'm going to wait and see what they recommend, because there are some folks working on checking the other states and compiling information for us for the next session in January.
I think the state could lower the gas tax, just to be in line at least with our other states. Our gas tax is extremely expensive. We built some brand new rest areas down 95, and you don't see people getting gas in Connecticut. You see them stopping in New Jersey or passing through and getting gas in other states. That could be another way to increase revenue or increase tax in Connecticut. And we should get rid of the business entity tax just in good faith in saying, look, you know, we don't want to charge you to start a business or close your business. We're going to provide an environment that, you know, projects to create jobs, and we need to create jobs in Connecticut.
The next question from Andrew Regali to Frank Apuzzo.
Frank, in that same vein, in the last couple of years, the governor has created a couple programs like the Small Business Express program. I think there's another manufacturers program for small manufacturing companies. Do you think the state has done an adequate job in, you know, helping small businesses succeed, or do you feel like, would you advocate for additional programs or different kinds of programs if elected?
You know, I sat on the board for the New Haven Chamber of Commerce, and they came in and brought the Small Business Express program in. And it seemed like a very good program, and I know it's been successful with companies. Even companies here in Wallingford have taken advantage of that process. But I think the Fast Five program, just to keep businesses here, was not. It's like corporate bribery just to make people stay here. Well, we have to ask ourselves, why don't they want to stay here? And I think that's the real problem, is we're not creating a business environment that's business friendly. People are leaving the state in droves. I mean, if you see the news, 50% of the people that live in Connecticut, if they had the means, would leave Connecticut. I mean, that's a huge problem. So I think, yes, those programs work, but we need to look at the problem as a whole and wonder why people want to leave Connecticut and not come to Connecticut.
Of course, it could be the snow, too. But I know when I get snowed on a couple of feet, I think about leaving for a warmer place. But Small Business Express was a bipartisan program accepted by both parties. It's very successful. We have 19 businesses in Wallingford that use it. They get grants and loans, and they can hire additional people. They're hiring 273 additional people from the Small Business Express. We also have a couple of very successful apprenticeship programs, Step Up and Step Up for Veterans. And there are 9 businesses in Wallingford that use those apprentices.
The next question is from Luther Turmel to Mary Mashinsky.
Mary, there's a business in town, a manufacturing concern, that recently said that it's had trouble finding enough people to work in its manufacturing facility. It seems to be like an eternal complaint about manufacturers, or that manufacturers have. What more can the state do in order to encourage people to train for manufacturing jobs?
Some of the community colleges are very good at this, especially Asnuntuck up in Enfield. And what they're doing up in Asnuntuck can be replicated in some of the other community colleges. The trick is to get the industrialists on the boards of the higher education institutions so they can say exactly what they're needing in the training, and then it'll happen, and the graduates will come out ready to work in that particular field. I know some of these jobs pay $70,000 a year, which is really good money. And when I was at one of the local plants, a fellow was telling me he was going to be retiring and going to the Virgin Islands on his factory wages. And that's really impressive that you could make that good money in advanced manufacturing. So we can get more people into that trade, and they'll have a very good life.
I've worked with manufacturing companies in my insurance business, and I've noticed, you know, I've seen companies here in Wallingford, this company in particular, started off as a 30 employee shop and grew up to over 100 people at one time. And then some jobs were going overseas, but a lot of those jobs are coming back now, skilled, because the workforce that we have here creates quality products. But they're not coming back to Connecticut. They're going to elsewhere because our energy costs are too high here in Connecticut. and we need to curb our energy costs to attract businesses to stay here in Connecticut. Connecticut used to be a manufacturing mecca, and it should be restored to that. We have good quality people here, and I know the business that you're talking about, Holochrome, and they are hurting. And a lot of those people have left. We don't have tool and die manufacturers here anymore, people that are passing those trades down from generations to generations. We should look at the technical schools and get those people from high school into those jobs to do OJT stuff. And some people, not to be bad about it, but don't want to go to college or don't, I served in the military. Oh, I'm sorry.
The next question is from Fardeen Salam for Frank Capuzzo.
What would you do to get the state of Connecticut to more adequately fund education here in Wallingford? And do you believe that the formula for funding education is fair for all towns in Connecticut?
Well, I don't believe it's fair, but I think that we should look at what's fair right now about the implementation of Common Core without any public input. I think we should stop the Common Core issue and look at what we're really looking at and put a freeze on it so we can have some actual public input on what is Common Core and why it's being mandated by the federal government. And the other thing about that is my concern about safety, about centralizing all of our children's information into one area and one place. And what about that data breaches? We hear about data breaches in the news every day. And I don't want my children's data being breached or passed on somewhere else. I mean, they're just young children. So I believe in the education system, and I think that it needs to be properly funded.
I think the question was mainly about funding, and the state made a commitment to the towns, and some years it falls short of that, and some years it does better. Wallingford recently, I worked hard to make sure this town aid came in at $25 million, and that most of that goes to education. We could do a higher percentage, and I would prefer that more of the special ed costs be put on the state. It should really be a state expense. The only way to further increase, in a tight budget, the only way to further increase education money would be to do more regional educational services. And then through just scale, you can bring down the costs for each town for their education.
The next question is from Andrew Regali for Mary Mashinsky.
Mary, I was curious, you've been in office for a really long time, a few decades now, and I just was curious what keeps you motivated, why do you feel like you could still provide a service to constituents, and kind of the rebuttal, I guess, to Frank would be, you're new on the scene, like, how do you feel you can do better than, what Mary has done in recent years?
I'm just a service-oriented person. I like to fix things. I never expected to be a legislator. I'm actually a biologist. Once I got in, I got more and more interested in writing legislation and working on projects for the town. And actually this year was my most successful year ever. I've had more of my bills passed this year than any other year. So I'm actually getting better at it as I'm there longer. But that's really it. I just like to make things work, fix things, make things more efficient, help people who call me for assistance. It's just fun for me to do and very rewarding, although the pay is really terrible. But the job is very rewarding.
Well, Andrew, I never expected to get into politics myself, but I have the experience in my personal life that would allow me the diversification to understand all walks of life and all types of businesses. I served our country for 6 years in the military. I worked in communications as an operations manager, and I've been working in insurance and construction for, 2 years in construction and 12 years in insurance, which I believe gives me a diverse background to be able to work with people to help Connecticut move forward. And that's the reason why I'm running, is because I noticed that businesses are doing more with less, and people are doing more with less, and there's something has to be done. This one-party rule in Connecticut for the past 20 years is wrong, and it needs to change. We need to open up dialogue from both sides of the aisle, and that's why I'm running.
The next question is from Luther Turmel to Frank Apuzzo.
Frank, I'd like to circle back to something that you said a few minutes ago. You were talking about how the state needs to reduce energy costs. A lot of what makes up energy costs, though, isn't really controlled at the state level. Could you be more specific about how you, as a
In 2011, we passed the largest tax increase, and in that budget was a .0026 mils on our gas bill. So I mean our generation. So I think that would be able to, if we can get rid of that, that would help out. And we should look at other programs that would offset, like the fuel cell that they just passed in Bridgeport. I believe you wrote an article on that one. Things of that nature that we could look at to help curb energy costs. And that's where I think that we would go with that, Luther. I don't know if that helps you or not, but.
Well, on my committee, when we came up with the 400 million of cuts and savings that we could do if we did things more efficiently, one of them was requiring an energy savings goal of state agencies. And it came up with a 20 million a year savings just from doing things more efficiently with energy, like we're doing here in Wallingford. So you can just set that. I actually heard Milford has done 41%, which is even, they broke the record across the state. But just doing efficiency improvements, you can probably reduce your energy consumption 30%. Then we may need some local generation as well.
Okay, the next question is from Fardeen Salam to Mary Mashinsky.
As Mr. Apuzzo had brought up before, Connecticut is currently one of the several states to have adopted the Common Core and SBAC testing, which has garnered mixed reviews, and as a student, I've seen those mixed reviews, which are mostly negative. Do you think that Connecticut should continue implementing Common Core, or do you think that we should opt out of the entire program? And would you support the idea of having students opt out of the test, of the SBAC test, if parents give permission to do so?
We're one of 46 states, not just a few, it's 46 that have adopted Common Core. And I know Dr. Menzo, who I'm a big fan of, is a fan of it. I know the Board of Education in Wallingford is a fan. They all believe in higher standards because in our global economy, our kids just have to be more successful and learn more information in order to compete with their peers around the world. So higher standards are good for job readiness and will help the students succeed. I'm very flexible on the testing. As long as we can show the students are achieving, I'm very willing to be flexible on testing. But I think having a base knowledge that every high school student is expected to know so they can compete with folks from Singapore and China and Germany and other countries is important.
Fardeen, you know my stance on Common Core, that I think that we should stop the program right now and look at restoring our education to our local level. Our state of Connecticut has been spending more money, even towns have been spending more money on education, but our testing and scores haven't gone up, and we need to look at the reason why that is happening, that we're putting money into a system that's not achieving the goals that we're looking to achieve. So I think, yes, the system needs to be looked at, but a central hand down from Washington, D.C. and from Hartford without any public input. Again, no public input on any of these bills is a problem. Our constituents are sent up to Hartford to listen to the public, and if the public doesn't want it, you shouldn't pass those bills. You should listen to your constituents.
The final question will come from Catherine Oswald to Frank Apuzzo.
Ms. Mashinsky said earlier that she had many bills passed in the past few years. If you were to be elected, what would the first on the list be for bills you want to pass?
Well, I think we need to look at government as a whole and see what programs are working and what programs aren't working, and what bills that we have that are on the books that aren't efficient anymore. We need to get government to be running more efficient, and And I think that's the process, to look at that first and see where we need to go so we can create jobs in an environment that helps our tax here in Wallingford and Connecticut.
What I'm going to be working on next are the recommendations from our committee program review and investigations that will be ready for January. And one of them is, what is the best use of the Veterans Home at Rocky Hill? And another is, do we need to do anything about the technical career certificates? I have constituents who have gone to a career school and failed to pass the exam for the career, and all their tuition money has been spent. And they're saying we need guidance on where we can get our career certificate and have a job successfully without using up our little bit of tuition money. So those two I know will be ready to go. We also have a bill on drones, regulation of drones, that we're working on. And then the anything else on the 400 million list that hasn't been implemented yet would also be in line for January.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Mr. Raposo, will you begin, please?
Thank you to the panel for having me. This has been a great experience. I'm very grateful for it, and great questions. Jean, thank you for having me as well, and the Wallingford community women. The reason why I'm running is, again, to make a difference here and make a change in Connecticut, and would love to get your vote on November 4th. I want to thank my wife and my family and my committee for helping me out. This has been, again, a great experience. But I want to be an advocate for Wallingford in Connecticut and help change Connecticut's business environment, and we're not doing that. Currently, we're at the bottom of every list that comes out, and we need to pick Connecticut back up from the bottom of the lists that come out. Right now, we have a 27.5 per capita debt, and we need to relook at that, and we need to look at how government spends our money, our tax money, picking winners and losers with your money and my money. And if I'm elected, I will be the advocate for Wallingford and Connecticut to make that change, to put us in the right direction to prosperity.
Thank you. Ms. Mashinsky, will you begin your comments, please?
I agree with my opponent that the economy and frugality in government are the key issues in this race. I am already working on these. This is what I've been doing the last several years specifically, working exactly on employment. First, we looked at my bipartisan committee. My co-chairman's a Republican. We looked at, with our committee, where the state is going and what the state's pluses and minuses are. We recommended building on the clusters of development rather than individual companies. We looked at young workers and why they can't get a job, and recommended better alignment between graduation and the job openings. We looked at older workers and recommended the 2 best programs for retraining older workers, and then changed tax credits to subsidize businesses that hire these workers who have been retrained. And they're being used right here in Wallingford by 19 businesses using the grants and loans, and 9 using the apprentices. We then looked at savings, and my committee came up with $400 million worth of savings and 30 different suggestions. On budget choices, I listened to my constituents who said the thing we most want you to do is keep our property taxes from going up. So I was able to keep municipal aid at $25 million, which lowered their property taxes by 6 mills. I've been assigned to work on government efficiency. That's my job as chairman of this committee. And our work is respected in a bipartisan way, and our bills are passed. I seek voter support to go back and do additional work on government efficiency and to represent Wallingford, both here and in the Capitol. And while we don't need the enterprise zone yet, I did pass it over a strenuous objection by my colleagues, with my colleagues from House and Senate, and it's ready to go to help Wallingford. So I'd like to go back and do more of the same and appreciate your support. And thank you to Wallingford Community Women and the panelists, questioners, and Jean for your sponsoring this event.
Thank you. This concludes the 85th Assembly District segment of the 2014 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to please vote on November 4th.